Amanda Johnson and her husband Tom seemed to have it all: a perfect marriage, a beautiful home, and a life everyone envied. But behind closed doors, Amanda was living a dangerous secret. Her affair with Robert, a close family friend, spiraled into a web of lies and betrayal. When Robert's sudden death shocks their quiet neighborhood, the truth behind his murder unravels, a shocking conspiracy that no one saw coming. What drove Amanda to manipulate her husband into committing the ultimate crime? The answers will leave you speechless. Amanda Johnson and her husband Tom lived what many would consider the perfect life. They resided in a beautiful, peaceful suburban neighborhood where everything seemed to fall into place. Their home was a charming 2-story house with a well-manicured lawn and the kind of neighbors who waved hello with warm smiles. To the outside world, they were a model couple: successful, loving, and secure. Tom worked as a business consultant, often traveling for work, while Amanda was a stay-at-home wife who took care of their home and social circle. They had no children, which left them ample time to enjoy each other's company and entertain guests at their comfortable home. Tom had built a successful career over the years, and Amanda had supported him through every step of it. Their relationship had always been filled with affection, and although life had its ups and downs, they had weathered every storm together. Most people saw them as the ideal couple. Tom was always respectful, kind, and attentive to Amanda's needs, while Amanda maintained a calm, caring demeanor that made her well-liked among their friends and family. Among the many people who regularly visited their home was Robert, a close family friend of Tom's. Robert had been a part of their lives for years, and the bond between him and Tom was one of mutual respect. He was a frequent guest at their dinner parties and social gatherings, and Amanda had always appreciated his company. He was charming, easy to talk to, and someone she had come to rely on during moments of loneliness when Tom was away for business. But in time, their friendship began to evolve in ways no one could have anticipated. What started as simple conversations and shared moments of laughter turned into something more intimate. Robert began to confide in Amanda about his personal struggles and the difficulties he faced in his own relationships, drawing Amanda in further. She found herself feeling sympathy for him, but those moments of sympathy soon blurred the lines of their friendship. They started spending more time together in private, and the connection between them became undeniable. Amanda tried to convince herself that it was harmless, just two people having a few quiet conversations while Tom was away. However, the more they talked, the more Amanda began to realize that she was attracted to Robert in ways she hadn't expected. Robert, in turn, reciprocated her feelings, and soon they began a secret affair. The passion between them was intense, and their stolen moments together became the highlight of Amanda's days. She was trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, torn between the man she had vowed to love and the excitement Robert brought into her life. As the affair continued, Amanda's guilt began to fester, but she pushed those feelings aside. She justified it to herself, convincing herself that her marriage had grown stale and that Tom, with his constant work trips, was emotionally distant. The intimacy she had been craving was now fulfilled by Robert, and she began to forget the life she had once cherished with Tom. Still, she kept everything a secret, masking her growing feelings for Robert behind the smile she put on every day for Tom and their friends. No one had any idea that beneath her calm exterior, Amanda was living a life of deception, until everything would soon come crashing down. Amanda's affair with Robert began to take on a life of its own. What had started as simple flirtation during long evenings while Tom was away evolved into something much more serious. Their meetings, once innocent, became deliberate and secretive. Amanda would lie to Tom, telling him she was going out with friends or spending time at a local spa. In truth, she was meeting Robert at secluded spots, sometimes in hotels, sometimes in the quiet corners of cafes, where no one would recognize them. The excitement of living a double life gave her a rush she couldn't ignore. Robert, too, seemed to relish their secret connection, his attention to her becoming more intense with each passing day. Every time Tom was away, Amanda would eagerly anticipate their time together. Robert's touch, his words, his presence, they made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. She justified it to herself, telling herself that her marriage had lost its spark long ago. Tom's frequent absences had left her lonely and disconnected, and she had convinced herself that she deserved this. It wasn't just about physical attraction, it was about the emotional connection she felt with Robert. He seemed to understand her in a way Tom no longer did. They shared personal stories, laughed about their own struggles, and built a bond that felt deeper than mere physical intimacy. Though Amanda found comfort in this new chapter of her life, the guilt continued to gnaw at her. She knew that what she was doing was wrong, but the thrill of the affair kept her from facing the consequences. She rationalized everything, telling herself that Tom would never find out. After all, Robert was a trusted family friend. How could anyone suspect the closeness between them was anything but innocent? To the world, Amanda and Tom still appeared the perfect couple. They attended social events together, smiled for pictures, and made small talk with friends. But behind closed doors, Amanda's world was torn between two men. Robert, too, seemed caught up in the whirlwind of the affair. He would often compliment Amanda, making her feel desired and special. He spoke of leaving his own difficult relationship, hinting at a future together though never quite promising it. These words gave Amanda hope, even though she couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of dread. She knew deep down that the affair was a fragile thing, a dangerous game of secrecy and lies. But for the time being, she couldn't stop. The relationship with Tom had become monotonous and predictable, while her moments with Robert were full of passion and unpredictability. Tom, on the other hand, began to notice subtle changes in Amanda's behavior. She was more distant, less engaged in their conversations, and she seemed to have fewer answers when he asked about her day. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something felt off. Amanda was spending more time on her phone, texting and making excuses to leave the house. Even their intimacy had grown more infrequent and mechanical. Tom tried to brush off his concerns, blaming work stress or his own exhaustion, but deep down he knew that something wasn't right. In their small world of normalcy, cracks began to form, yet they were invisible to everyone but Amanda. The affair, which she once thought would be a brief escape, had now become an integral part of her life. She found herself more attached to Robert than she had ever intended. Her emotions, once under control, were now entangled in the affair, and she struggled to keep it all from unraveling. Little did she know, her secrets were getting harder to keep hidden, and the consequences of her actions were drawing closer. It all came crashing down on a quiet evening in late spring, the kind of evening that felt like any other. Tom had been away for a business trip for a few days, and Amanda had made plans to meet Robert. It was going to be another stolen afternoon together, an escape from the monotony of her marriage. But this time, something was different. Tom was returning home earlier than expected. He had finished his meetings earlier than planned and decided to surprise Amanda with an impromptu evening together. His thoughts were filled with love, as he had been planning to rekindle their bond, which he felt had been slipping away. He missed her and hoped that a surprise gesture would bring them closer. When Tom arrived home, the house was eerily quiet. He was taken aback when he saw that Amanda's car was still in the driveway, but the house seemed still. He called out her name as he entered, expecting her to appear from the kitchen or the living room. There was no response. Frowning, he set down his briefcase and made his way through the hallway. It was then that he heard muffled voices from upstairs. Curiosity and concern crept into his mind. He knew Amanda had been spending more time in the study recently, so he made his way toward the stairs. His footsteps were soft against the carpet, and as he reached the top of the stairs, he felt his heart begin to race. He had no idea what he was about to walk into. As Tom rounded the corner toward the bedroom, he froze. The scene before him was nothing short of a nightmare. There in their bed lay Amanda and Robert, caught in an intimate moment. The shock of the sight hit Tom like a physical blow. His body stiffened, his mind racing in disbelief. For a moment he could hardly process what he was seeing. His wife, the woman he had loved and trusted for years, was in the arms of another man. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as the truth hit him with brutal clarity. Everything he had believed about his marriage, Everything he thought he knew about Amanda was shattered in an instant. Amanda and Robert both froze at the sight of Tom standing in the doorway. Their eyes went wide with fear, and for a few seconds, none of them moved. Tom's chest tightened with a combination of anger and confusion. His entire world had just collapsed before his eyes, and yet he couldn't bring himself to say a word. He felt paralyzed, as though his mind couldn't process the betrayal he was witnessing. He had always trusted Robert, had welcomed him into their home without suspicion, and now here he was betrayed by two people he had loved and trusted. Amanda, her face flushed with panic, scrambled to cover herself, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The air was thick with guilt, and Tom could feel the weight of their actions pressing down on him. His mind spun with 100 questions, but none of them made sense. How had this happened? Why had Amanda done this? Had he missed the signs? His anger began to rise, but it was overshadowed by a deep, aching sadness. It was a pain unlike anything he had ever felt, and in that moment he realized that his marriage was over. Nothing could undo what had just been revealed. Amanda, struggling to find words, could only look at him with wide, apologetic eyes. But Tom wasn't interested in her excuses. His heart was too broken to listen. He turned on his heel and walked out of the room, not knowing where he was going, only knowing that he couldn't stay in that house another second. The betrayal was too much to bear, and he needed space, time to process what had just happened. Robert, looking guilty and defeated, remained still in the bed, not daring to move. Amanda, now alone, sat in the silence, her mind racing. The moment she had been dreading had arrived. The truth was no longer something she could hide behind closed doors. It had come to light in the most painful way possible, and with it the weight of her choices began to sink in. The life she had known, the life she had shared with Tom, was gone, and there was no going back. In the days that followed the shocking discovery, Tom's world became a blur of anger, hurt, and disbelief. His once stable and predictable life had been shattered in an instant, and he was left trying to navigate through a storm of emotions. Amanda, unable to find the right words to explain herself, gave him space, not daring to approach him. The silence between them grew heavy, suffocating. Tom could no longer look at her without feeling a surge of resentment. How could she do this to him? To their life together? It was as though everything he had worked for, everything he had trusted, had been a lie. Tom's mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. The more he thought about the affair, the more consumed he became with the idea of Robert being the root cause of his pain. The man who had been his friend, his confidant, had been the one to destroy everything. Tom couldn't bear the thought of Robert walking free while he was left to pick up the broken pieces of his life. The betrayal felt like a wound that would never heal, and as time passed, his anger transformed into a dangerous obsession. What began as a desire for clarity and closure slowly morphed into something darker. Tom couldn't stop thinking about how to make Robert pay for what he had done. At first it was a fleeting thought, a simple fantasy of confrontation. But the more he dwelled on it, the more his plans began to take shape. He convinced himself that Robert had to be eliminated. If he was gone, Amanda would have no choice but to come back to him, to beg for forgiveness, and for their life to return to what it once was. In his mind, it seemed like the only solution. He began to meticulously plan how he would carry out his revenge. At first, it wasn't anything drastic. Small, calculated steps, distancing himself from Amanda, using her to gather information and finding ways to get Robert alone. He would strike when Robert least expected it. Each detail was carefully thought out, and Tom believed that, once it was done, he could reclaim his life. He even began to view Amanda as a pawn in his game, a tool he could use to execute his plan. She had betrayed him, and now it was her turn to feel the consequences. But what Tom didn't realize was that his obsession was blinding him. His emotions, once a source of love and care, had now turned into a dangerous force that clouded his judgment. He couldn't see how twisted his thoughts had become. His fixation on Robert turned him into someone unrecognizable. What he failed to understand was that revenge, no matter how carefully planned, only left destruction in its wake. The deeper he sank into his desire for vengeance, the more he lost sight of everything he once valued. While Tom's thoughts grew darker, Amanda was quietly sinking into her own guilt and fear. She couldn't face Tom, and she couldn't face the reality of what she had done. Robert had promised that they would find a way to be together, but Amanda began to see the cracks in his promises. Robert, once so attentive and passionate, had started to pull away. He had his own fears, his own secrets, and Amanda felt more alone than ever. Her once bright and exciting affair had turned into a nightmare she could no longer escape from. Yet the truth she couldn't avoid was that Tom was the one who had truly suffered, and she was the one responsible for it. As the days passed, Tom grew colder and more distant. He withdrew into himself, consumed by thoughts of what to do next. Every encounter with Amanda felt like a betrayal in itself. He couldn't bring himself to forgive her. Not yet, not after everything. And so, as he plotted, the tension between them grew unbearable. Both were trapped in a web of lies, their relationship irreparably broken. But neither knew that the consequences of their actions were only just beginning to unfold. As Tom's plans for revenge grew more concrete, the truth about his descent into darkness began to take shape, leading to a point of no return. Detective Anna Harlow had seen many cases, but there was something unsettling about the death of Robert. It had appeared to be a random act of violence, at first an unfortunate accident. But as she dug deeper into the investigation, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. The details didn't add up. Robert's sudden death, occurring in the same neighborhood where Amanda and Tom lived, struck her as too much of a coincidence. It didn't take long for her to uncover that Robert had been close to both Amanda and Tom, a family friend with a history of spending time at their house. Detective Harlow began to piece together a story that was far more complicated than she initially thought. At first, all signs pointed to Tom. His alibi was shaky, and there were rumors about a growing tension between him and Robert. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices between the two men on the night Robert had been killed, and Tom's erratic behavior in the days following the incident raised suspicions. Detective Harlow didn't want to jump to conclusions, but she knew something was off. Tom's reaction to his friend's death seemed too controlled, too perfect. There was no grief, no shock, just coldness. His demeanor didn't match the circumstances. But the more Harlow dug, the more unsettling details she found. A series of phone calls between Amanda and Robert in the weeks leading up to his death caught her attention. The timing of the calls was too precise. They had been in constant contact even when Tom was home. What made it more alarming was the fact that Amanda had lied about where she had been on several occasions when Robert was murdered. She had been seen meeting with him on the night he died, just hours before he was found dead. As Harlow continued to investigate, she uncovered a startling revelation. The motive behind Robert's murder was not as simple as a jealous husband seeking revenge. It became clear that Amanda had been hiding her own dark secrets. She had not only known about Tom's plot to eliminate Robert, but she had been involved in the plan from the start. In fact, Amanda had orchestrated the entire thing. The twisted plan had begun with Amanda's feelings of guilt and betrayal, but it soon evolved into something much more calculating. She had grown tired of Robert, seeing him as a threat to her stability. She didn't want him around anymore, but she also knew that killing him herself would make her a prime suspect. So she manipulated Tom into believing that Robert needed to be dealt with. She played on his emotions, making him think that eliminating Robert would somehow restore their broken marriage. Amanda had used Tom's rage and heartbreak to her advantage, carefully guiding him toward the idea of Robert's death. As Tom became more consumed by his plan for revenge, Amanda made sure to stay in the background, only offering subtle encouragement. She knew exactly what buttons to push to make Tom do the unthinkable. It wasn't until Detective Harlow found a series of incriminating text messages between Amanda and Robert that the full truth began to unravel. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Harlow discovered that Amanda had been the one to arrange the location of Robert's death. She had been the one to lure him to the spot where he would be murdered, all while pretending to be the innocent wife caught in the middle of a tragic love triangle. Amanda had believed that once Robert was out of the picture, she would be able to reclaim her life with Tom. But in her quest for control, she had underestimated the consequences of her actions. Tom was arrested for his role in Robert's death, but it was Amanda who was truly the mastermind. In the end, both Amanda and Tom faced the consequences of their deceit, their lives destroyed by the very secrets they thought they could keep hidden. Detective Harlow closed the case, knowing that the twisted web of lies and manipulation had finally come to an end. But for Amanda and Tom, there was no escaping the truth and no chance of ever rebuilding the lives they had once known. Their choices had sealed their fate, and the destruction they had caused was irreversible.